What's going on, guys? It's Birdie. I'm back with another video. Thank you for the recent support on the last videos. Today I am reacting to why American companies usually fail in Europe. So here in America, like one of our biggest stores, which I can't believe that you guys do not have, is Walmart. Walmart is like go-to for us Americans. Like whether you need, dish soap, toilet paper, really anything, going to like groceries, anything you need, you can pretty much just go to Walmart. And it kind of blows my mind that you guys do not have that in Europe. So let's get right into the video. Like I said, it is American companies usually fail in Europe. Why they do. Let's check it out.
On the 30th of December 1997, America's largest grocery chain, and at the time the world's largest company, Walmart, opened its first store in Germany. At the grand unveiling, the company spokesperson announced this as the first step to taking the continent. But just 9 years later, after expanding to 85 stores across Germany, Walmart seized all its European operations, reporting losses of more than $1 billion. This was just one example of countless massive American companies who have tried to conquer Europe and failed. Staples tried in 1998, Home Depot in 2001, and even Best Buy in 2010. All of them failed. So what was it that they were doing wrong? After all, they came from the land of capitalism, had large budgets and enough experience to crush the competition, yet almost 9 times out of 10 they failed.
A retail giant is closing stores. Walmart plans to shut down 269 stores. Best Buy is laying off thousands of workers, even though sales there are soaring.
In 2023, European customers spent more than $9 trillion, making the EU the second largest consumer market in the world, behind only the United States. To most people, this didn't really come as a surprise. After all, just like the US, multiple European countries rank among the wealthiest and most developed on the planet. And with similar populations and similar sized economies, you'd be forgiven for thinking Europe and America basically run the same ways. But in many ways,
the Walmart shut down and stuff like that. What do you guys have? Like, what's your main store there? Similar to Walmart.
In 2023, about 700 million people lived in Europe, but only about 10% of them spoke English as their official language. Home to over 40 different languages, Europe is vastly different from the US. While something like language may seem trivial, this difference is just one of the many symptoms of something deeper. Something that explains why American companies struggle in Europe. In the 1960s, Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede set out to answer a simple question. Why do people from different countries behave so differently? And by 1980, that work became known as Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions, a framework for understanding how culture shapes behavior, broken down into 6 key dimensions. One of these dimensions, uncertainty avoidance, measures how comfortable a society is with unpredictability. And this is where things start to go wrong for American retailers. You see, in the US, uncertainty avoidance gets a score of about 46. This means Americans are generally more relaxed about rules, comfortable with experimentation, and okay figuring things out as they go. American companies also tend to operate the same way. They test things, pivot quickly, and then adapt on the fly. Some European countries like the UK also fall into this category, but move a bit to the east and that picture changes fast, with countries like Germany scoring as high as 65, meaning they prefer things spelled out, standardized and formal. So when American companies show up with their "we'll figure it out as we go" approach, German consumers often find this disturbing. In 1997, Walmart opened its first store in Germany, and just like its US locations, all employees were given a company handbook. It contained over 100 different rules, but in the culture section, there was one rule that took priority over everything else. Whenever a customer comes within 10 feet of you, you must look them in the eye, greet them, and ask them how you can help them. To Americans, this was considered good customer service.
That's usually like what happens in like today's society, like Walmart's in America, for real.
Germans, with their high uncertainty avoidance scores, shopping at Walmart was a disaster. The friendliness felt fake, the small talk intrusive.
Oh, it definitely feels fake. You go into Walmart in America, the first thing you hear is "Welcome to Walmart."
Constant smiling, unprofessional. Customers thought, why is this stranger trying to talk to me? And in some cases, this friendliness was even misinterpreted as sexual advances. Instead of building trust, it created discomfort. And finally, after 9 years of poor sales, Walmart had to pull out of Germany.
Wow.
Another one of Hofstede's dimensions, long-term orientation, measures how societies balance tradition with change. Here, the US scores relatively low, which means Americans would generally replace old methods of doing things for newer, more efficient ones, something American companies have always been used to. Countries like the UK and Germany, however, which score much higher, tend to value long-standing traditions, established norms, and gradual change. In other words, they don't switch to new ways of doing things just because they're more efficient. And that brings us to Best Buy. In 2010, the American retail giant
They stick
tried
with how they
bringing
like
big
to do
bulk
things.
stores to the UK. Their pitch? Bulk shopping was way more efficient. In the UK, however, shopping in small quantities had always been the norm, and with their tendency to stick with things like they already used to, Best Buy felt unnecessary. And after years of barely any business, Best Buy had no choice but to pack up and leave. Time and time again, American companies have struggled in Europe, not because their business models are bad, but because they kept trying to
Best
sell
Buy is
the
definitely like, I'd say, like in America, like one of our hottest stores, like most popular stores for going to, like, you know, electronics wise.
American way of doing things to people who don't really care for it. It simply didn't work. But that didn't mean American success in Europe was entirely impossible. Once companies accepted that European consumer culture was fundamentally different, they stopped trying to copy and paste the American model and started building Europe-specific playbooks instead, all in an effort to navigate those differences and cash in on the continent's vast consumer market. But as they quickly discovered, this was going to be easier said than done, because unlike what they were used to, Europe wasn't just another market. It was a collection of different values, cultures, and people that had just happened to share the same continent. In 1985, Domino's Pizza opened its first store in Europe,
They even had a
located in
Domino's.
Bedfordshire, England. Unlike its US locations, which were mostly large restaurants, things in the UK were completely different. Brits didn't eat out nearly twice as much as Americans did, so instead of opening large suburban restaurants, Domino's focused on small stores in student-packed areas that prioritized delivery over dine-in, and it worked. By 1999, they'd expanded
I
to
mean, honestly, like in America, I've never eaten inside a Domino's. I usually just order for takeout or delivery.
over 200 stores, and in less than a decade, that number had more than doubled. From Domino's perspective, the lesson was clear. They'd found a winning model, and for an American company, that meant one thing: scale it. You see, for decades, these companies have been trained to replicate whatever works, and it all comes down to how the US is structured. With shared language, media, and consumer expectations, the US is more or less a unified market, so a strategy that works in one part of the country will almost always work everywhere else. This is why Walmart can roll out identical stores nationwide, why McDonald's sells the same menu in every state, and why Coca-Cola can use the same marketing campaign. from
Same menu.
California
I
to
wouldn't say that. I've seen some videos of like McDonald's in like different countries. They have different options, like some crazy stuff. I don't know. Let me know, like, if wherever you're at in Europe, if you guys have a McDonald's, because I know there's a lot of different countries. McDonald's is everywhere. Like, let me know, like, if there's different food options than there is in America.
Virginia. So when Domino's executives saw their delivery-first strategy take off in the UK, expanding it across Europe didn't feel risky, but instead like the next logical step. By 2012, they'd expanded to Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and for a moment, it seemed like they'd cracked the code, up until it didn't.
Domino's Pizza is to close down all its stores in Italy.
Shut down all of its locations in Italy.
Domino's has reportedly closed its last branch.
After it failed to win over Italians with its mass-produced pizzas.
In 2015, Domino's entered Italy, the birthplace of pizza, with its European playbook, making pizzas as fast as possible and delivering it to people's doorsteps. But in Italy, pizza wasn't just another meal, it was their culture. Something that had been crafted with care and eaten straight out of an oven. Domino's, of course, ignored this. After all, its European strategy was working in other parts of the continent, so why wouldn't it work here? Just 7 years later, the company collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down all 29 locations across the country.
Wow.
A fraction of the nearly 800 it had once projected. This One Europe strategy isn't exactly unique to Domino's either. In the 1980s, Coors, the American beer company, successfully expanded to the UK with its Turn It Loose advertising campaign. British consumers loved it, so they scaled the campaign to Spain. But when it launched, turn it loose was immediately interpreted as a common Spanish expression meaning suffering from diarrhea. And just like that, the brand
Suffering
image
from
was
diarrhea?
destroyed. Time and time again, American companies have failed in Europe because they underestimate the time, money, and commitment required to succeed there. They treat Europe like the US, a collection of similar markets with minor variations. But in reality, Europe is far too diverse for this logic to work. In other words, a product that sells well, or a marketing campaign that resonates in one European country, won't necessarily work in another, even if they share a border. Many American companies have struggled to adapt to this, and even when they recognize the problem, they often choose to ignore it, because building country-specific strategies is expensive, slow, and difficult to scale. But Europe hasn't responded to this resistance with indifference. As American companies try to force their methods into European markets, Europe pushes back. And in 2024 alone, that pushback cost American companies more than $7 billion.
Wow.
American
Lot of
companies
money.
dominate globally, but fail in Europe, and it's not just because of cultural misunderstandings or bad strategies. It's that their entire business models are built around a version of capitalism that just doesn't exist there. In the US, capitalism has always been straightforward. For the most part, government stays out the way, creating an environment where companies can take more risks, expand more aggressively, and then take the most amount of profit possible, even though this sometimes means engaging in child labour. In Europe, however, things are a little bit different. Capitalism does still exist, but the government steps in to balance growth against other priorities like worker protections, consumer rights, fair competition, and environmental standards. And even though the amount of regulation in Europe has recently been brought under scrutiny, for American companies this causes massive issues. In 1997, when Walmart entered Germany, it did the same thing that had made it successful in the US. It leveraged its relationship with manufacturers, got massive bulk discounts, and offered customers the lowest prices on the market.
Save
In
money,
less than
live
a
better.
month, it received an official letter from the German government: raise prices or face penalties. You see, instead of trying to compete, German retailers simply reported Walmart to the authorities for selling products below cost. Walmart executives, who built
Dang.
their entire business on being able to offer the lowest prices, were left confused. To them, this was just competition, but in Germany, it was a violation of fair competition laws. And
Wow.
complying didn't mean tweaking a few policies. It meant stripping away the very thing that made Walmart Walmart, its competitive pricing. After 9 years of struggling, it sold off all its
Nowadays,
stores,
honestly,
exiting
Walmart is very expensive here in America. Like, I mean, just the cost of living is in general, but yeah, Walmarts are high.
with nearly $1 billion in losses. For decades, American companies have built their entire business models without strict regulations, controlling what they can and can't do. This has led to a situation whereby when said regulations are introduced, their entire business model falls apart. With labour laws that protect employees, Amazon can't cycle through workers to maintain a consistently motivated workforce like it does in the US.
Amazon can run
And
out
with
of
privacy
workers.
laws that protect people's data, Meta can't bombard Europeans with targeted ads, its main revenue source. And with competition laws that protect smaller businesses, Walmart can't operate efficiently in Europe. And it's not just that these regulations exist, it's that they're actually enforced, something American companies are all but used to. In 2023 alone, Meta was fined over $1 billion for violating privacy laws, Apple $500 million for anti-competitive practices, and Intel over $400 million for abusing its market position. In fact, Alphabet, Google's parent company, has been fined so many times by the EU that it now has a dedicated section for these fines in the balance sheet. In the US, however, companies barely get punished for things like this. No fines, no breakups, no consequences. Where American capitalism rewards whoever can grow the fastest, European capitalism balances growth with social welfare. And while this means European companies are often less dominant than their American counterparts, that's always been the plan. It's about confronting the fact that their entire business model, the strategies, the tactics, and the competitive advantages that made them successful, was designed for a version of capitalism that simply doesn't exist in Europe.
That makes
And
sense.
adapting would require becoming a fundamentally different company, which for most of them just isn't working. For decades, American companies have thrived on a simple formula, finding out what works and scaling it no matter the cost. But in Europe, things have always operated on a different logic, one where cultural nuances matter, where stability is valued over disruption, and where regulations exist, not to slow down businesses, but to protect the people those businesses serve. So for American companies to succeed in Europe, they must be willing to put in the work, because at the end of the day, Europe isn't a single market waiting to be conquered. It's a dozen different markets, each with its own language, culture, and way of doing business. And until American companies truly accept that, they'll keep making the same billion-dollar mistakes for years to come.
Wow. It's actually insane to think like all those companies just ended up like not working out. Like it's crazy. Like I said, Walmart is definitely like America's like go-to store. If you're in America, most likely you shop at Walmart. I definitely understand it though, like all the rules and stuff, like how you guys want to do it. Like, you know, in Europe, you guys don't want to follow all the rules that Walmart requires here in the US. Like I said, you go into the store in America and the first thing they say is like, welcome to Walmart, or you need help with anything. It does, you know, some people might find that uncomfortable. Like just the way that the American businesses like run is definitely different. Like a lot of capitalism for sure. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Make sure you guys leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. My name is Birdie, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.